Welcome, wanderers of the forgotten paths, to another descent into the abyss that is the shadow behind you. I am your guide through the veils of time, where the echoes of lost souls linger in the mist, and the ground itself seems to breathe with secrets long buried. Tonight, we venture into the heart of the Missouri Ozarks, that rugged labyrinth of hollows and hills where the earth folds upon itself like the pages of a forbidden tome. It's 1915, a year when the world beyond these mountains churns with the machinery of progress. Automobiles rumbling down city streets, electric lights banishing the night in far-off metropolises. But here, in the Ozarks, time moves differently. It's slower, thicker, like molasses dripping from a cracked jar, laced with the tang of superstition and the whisper of ancient curses. Imagine, if you will, the Missouri Ozarks in the grip of autumn. The leaves turn blood red and gold, carpeting the forest floor in a deceptive beauty that hides the rot beneath. The air is crisp, carrying the scent of wood smoke from distant cabins, mingled with the earthy musk of damp soil and decaying foliage. Rivers like the Current and the White Snake through the valleys, their waters dark and inscrutable, reflecting skies that often brood with storm clouds. Settlements are sparse, clusters of weathered log homes clinging to hillsides, where families eke out a living from stubborn soil, timber, and the occasional illicit still hidden in the underbrush. Railroads have begun to creep in, bringing outsiders with their starched collars and skeptical eyes, but the old ways persist. Folks here speak of the Blue Man, a spectral figure wandering the woods since the Civil War, his skin tinted azure from some alchemical mishap or demonic pact. They whisper of grave houses, small, roofed structures built over tombs to keep spirits from rising, and of the Ozark Howler, a beast whose cry foretells death, part bear, part devil, with eyes that glow like embers in the night. It's in this world of shadowed folklore and unyielding isolation that our tale unfolds, centered on a girl named Clara Caldwell. Born in 1905 to a family of humble farmers in a forgotten hollow near the town of Ozark, Clara was no ordinary child. From her earliest days, she possessed a mind that burned like a comet streaking across the midnight sky. Brilliant, inexplicable, and ultimately terrifying. By the age of 10, in that fateful year of 1915, Clara could recite entire volumes of Shakespeare she had never seen, solve mathematical riddles that stumped university professors, and predict the whims of nature with an accuracy that bordered on the prophetic. But her gifts were not mere intellect. They carried a darkness, a shadow that seemed to follow her, whispering truths no child should know. Picture her as a slight figure with pale skin stretched taut over delicate bones, hair the color of raven feathers cascading down her back. And eyes, oh, those eyes, like twin pools of midnight ink, holding depths that could drown the unwary. She moved through the world with an unnatural grace, her small hands sketching diagrams in the dirt that mimicked the stars above or the veins of leaves below. The villagers called her the Little Oracle, half in awe, half in fear, for in the Ozarks, extraordinary abilities often smacked of witchcraft, of deals struck with entities better left unnamed. Superstitions ran deep here. A black cat crossing your path meant misfortune. Planting on Good Friday invited blight, and a child's unnatural wisdom. That could only be the devil's mark. Yet, Clara's story is not just one of prodigious talent. It's a chronicle of a vanishing family, a bloodline erased from the annals of history, as if the mountains themselves swallowed them whole. Her parents, Elijah and Agnes Caldwell, came from old stock, descendants of Scotch, Irish settlers who fled famine and persecution only to find new horrors in these untamed lands. Rumors swirled of a family curse, tied to an ancestor who meddled in forbidden knowledge during the frontier days, perhaps pacting with native spirits displaced by the white man's greed. The Caldwells' kin had dwindled over generations. Uncles lost to mine collapses, aunts claimed by mysterious fevers, cousins who simply wandered into the woods and never returned. In 1915, as war raged across the Atlantic and America teetered on the brink of involvement, the Ozarks remained a world apart, insulated by its geography and its ghosts. But Clara's brilliance pierced that isolation like a lantern in the fog. drawing attention from beyond the hills. Word of her reached the ears of scientists and skeptics, men of reason who sought to dissect her mind like a specimen under glass. Dr. Harlan Thorpe, a Harvard-educated psychologist with a penchant for the anomalous, arrived in the hollow that summer, his valise packed with instruments and his heart armored against the supernatural. He came to explain the unexplainable, to quantify Clara's genius through tests and observations. What he found would shatter his worldview, unleashing a chain of events that led to disappearances, hauntings, and a legacy of terror that lingers to this day. But why, dear listener, should this tale grip you so? Because Clara Caldwell represents the ultimate horror, the child who sees too much, knows too much, and in her innocence unveils the fragile veil between our rational world and the abyss beyond. What if her mind wasn't a gift from God or nature, but a conduit for something ancient, something that slumbered in the Ozark soil, waiting to awaken? As we delve deeper, you'll feel the chill of those hills, the weight of unspoken fears, and the inescapable pull of a story that refuses to stay buried. Stay with me, for the shadow behind you grows longer with every word, and Clara's secrets are about to unfold. Let us begin our journey into the heart of the mystery, where the line between genius and madness blurs into oblivion. Now, let us step back into the mists of time, to the summer of 1915 in Shadow Hollow, a narrow crease in the Ozark landscape where the sun struggles to penetrate the canopy of towering oaks and hickories. The air hangs heavy with the scent of wild honeysuckle, and the faint, acrid tang of moonshine stills hidden in the undergrowth. Chickens scratch in the dirt yards of scattered cabins, their clucks mingling with the distant lowing of cattle and the ceaseless buzz of cicadas. Life here is hard, etched into the faces of the inhabitants, furrowed brows from endless toil, eyes shadowed by the perpetual twilight of the hollow. At the center of this world stands the Caldwell homestead, a ramshackle structure of weathered logs chinked with mud, its tin roof patched with whatever scraps Elijah Caldwell could scavenge from the timber mills. Elijah, a broad-shouldered man in his late 30s, with calloused hands and a beard streaked with premature gray, works the land with a stoic determination born of generations of farmers. He rises before dawn to tend fields of corn and tobacco, wresting sustenance from soil that's more rock than earth. His wife, Agnes, is a wiry woman of quiet strength, her apron perpetually dusted with flour from baking cornbread over an open hearth. She manages the household with a firm hand, raising their 4 children amidst the isolation, the eldest boy, Samuel, 12 years old and already shouldering a man's burdens, little Mary, 8, with her braids and wide-eyed curiosity, baby Thomas, barely 2, toddling about with innocent glee. And then Clara, our Clara. From the moment she drew her first breath in that drafty cabin, she was different. Agnes would later recount, in hushed tones to neighbors over quilting bees, how Clara didn't cry like other newborns. Instead, she gazed up with those piercing black eyes, as if assessing the world she'd entered. By 6 months, she was babbling words, real words, not infantile gibberish. "Mama, Papa, and stranger still, star," as she pointed to the night sky through the cabin's single window. Elijah dismissed it as coincidence, but deep down, unease stirred, like the first tremor before an earthquake. As the years passed, Clara's peculiarities mounted. At 2, she wandered into the barn and arranged tools into perfect geometric patterns, murmuring equations that Elijah, with his rudimentary schooling, couldn't fathom. By 4, she was reading the family Bible aloud, her voice clear and melodic, interpreting passages with insights that left the local preacher, Reverend Silas Hawthorne, unsettled during Sunday services at the one-room church house. "The child speaks as if she's walked with the prophets," he'd say, crossing himself, though Baptists weren't prone to such gestures. The villagers, a tight, knit community of perhaps 50 souls, began to whisper. In the Ozarks, where folklore wove through daily life like kudzu vines, a child like Clara evoked tales of changelings, fairy children swapped for human ones, or worse, witches' spawn. But it was in 1915, as Clara turned 10, that her brilliance truly ignited, casting long shadows over the hollow. That spring, a blight struck the crops, leaves curling black as if scorched by invisible flame. Farmers gathered at the general store, a clapboard building stocked with bolts of calico and barrels of salt pork, muttering about omens. Clara, accompanying her mother on errands, overheard and approached old man Harlan, the storekeeper. In a voice soft yet commanding, she said, "It's the soil, Mr. Harlan. Too much lime from the runoff. Mix in sulfur from the caves, and it'll balance." Harlan laughed it off, but desperation led him to try. Within weeks, his fields revived while others withered. Word spread like wildfire through dry brush. Soon, Clara's predictions became legend. She foretold storms days in advance, directing her father to secure the livestock just before hail pelted the roof. She healed ailments with poultices of herbs gathered from secret spots in the woods. Mullein for coughs, willow bark for fevers, remedies she claimed, the trees whispered to her. Samuel, her brother, idolized her, following her on rambles where she'd sketch inventions, a water wheel that harnessed the creek's flow more efficiently, or a trap for rabbits that spared unnecessary suffering. Mary, however, grew wary, confiding to her doll that Clara's eyes see through you, like your glass. Elijah and Aggs tried to shield her, but the outside world intruded. Newspapers from Springfield carried tales of child prodigies like young William James Sidis in the East, whose mathematical prowess made headlines. Inspired, a local schoolteacher, Miss Eleanor Prout, wrote to academics describing Clara's feats. Responses trickled in, skeptical at first, then intrigued. And so, in July, as heat waves shimmered over the hills, Dr. Harlan Thorpe arrived by train in nearby Gainesville, hiring a mule cart to traverse the rutted paths to Shadow Hollow. Thorpe was a man of science, tall and lean with wire-rimmed spectacles and a mustache trimmed to precision. Educated at Harvard, he specialized in psychology and anomalous cognition, having studied savants and mediums across the country. He viewed the Ozarks as a backwater, ripe for rational explanation. Superstition is merely ignorance dressed in folklore, he'd quipped to his assistants back home. But upon meeting Clara, his certitude wavered. She greeted him at the cabin door, curtsying with poise beyond her years. "Dr. Thorpe, you've come to measure my mind, but beware. The shadows here measure back." Her words, delivered with a faint smile, sent a chill down his spine despite the sweltering heat. Over the next days, he subjected her to tests, arithmetic problems solved in seconds, languages like French and Latin spoken fluently though never taught, puzzles assembled blindfolded. Clara excelled, but her explanations unnerved him. "The numbers dance in my head like fireflies," she'd say, or, "the words come from the wind, carrying echoes of old tongues," as Thorpe delved deeper tensions brewed. Villagers, already suspicious, saw his presence as an invitation for trouble. Reverend Hawthorne preached sermons on the dangers of pride, quoting Proverbs. "Pride goeth before destruction." Strange occurrences began as livestock found dead with no marks, shadows flitting at the edges of vision, whispers in the night that sounded like forgotten names. Elijah dismissed them as coincidence, but Agnes, clutching her rosary, a relic from her Catholic forebears, feared a curse awakened. One evening, as dusk painted the hollow in bruised purples, Clara led Thorpe to a clearing where ancient stones stood in a circle, remnants of native Osage rituals. "This is where it began," she murmured. "My great-grandmother danced here, bargaining with the spirits for knowledge. The blood remembers." Thorpe, notebook in hand, felt the ground shift subtly, as if the earth breathed. That night, he dreamed of eyes watching from the trees, and awoke to find his instruments rearranged in patterns mimicking Clara's childhood sketches. Little did he know, the true horror was just beginning to unfold, as the Caldwell family teetered on the edge of oblivion. As the summer of 1915 waned into a foreboding autumn, the air in Shadow Hollow grew thick with unspoken dread, like the fog that rolled in from the rivers, obscuring paths and muffling cries. The leaves turned, not in vibrant celebration, but in a sickly pallor, as if the trees themselves sensed the encroaching darkness. Dr. Harlan Thorpe, once a beacon of rationality, found his resolve crumbling under the weight of inexplicable events. His tests on Clara continued, but now they were laced with urgency, as if he raced against an invisible clock ticking toward catastrophe. Clara, ever the enigma, seemed to thrive amid the chaos. Her predictions sharpened, she warned of a flash flood that swept away a neighbor's bridge, saving lives. She diagnosed illnesses with a touch, whispering cures that blended herbal lore with arcane mutterings. But her gifts came at a cost. Nightmares plagued her family. Samuel awoke screaming of shadow people. Clawing at his bed, Mary hid under covers, babbling about eyes in the walls. Even baby Thomas wailed inconsolably, as if sensing entities circling the cradle. Agnes, her face gaunt from sleepless nights, confided in Thorpe. "It's the bloodline. Elijah's kin have always been touched. Vanishings, madness. I thought Clara was a blessing, but she's the key to the curse." Thorpe, delving into family history, uncovered fragments of truth. The Caldwells traced to early settlers in the 1830s, when Scotch-Irish immigrants clashed with Osage tribes over land. Legend spoke of Elijah's great-grandfather, Josiah Caldwell, a surveyor who desecrated a sacred burial mound, unearthing artifacts inscribed with unknown symbols. Josiah vanished shortly after, his journal ranting of whispers from the void, granting forbidden knowledge. Subsequent generations suffered, children born with the sight, families dwindling as members wandered into the woods, drawn by unseen calls. Vanishing families, the villagers called them, echoing tales of entire clans erased from Ozark annals. Conflicts escalated. Reverend Hawthorne rallied the community, branding Clara a vessel of Satan. Torches flickered at night meetings, voices rising in hymns to ward off evil. Elijah defended his daughter fiercely, shotgun in hand, but doubt crept in. One harvest moon, as orange light bathed the hollow, a chilling event unfolded. Samuel, helping with chores, followed Clara into the barn. She stood trance-like, sketching symbols on the floor, circles within circles, lines intersecting like veins. The gate opens, she intuned. Suddenly, shadows coalesced, forming shapes that twisted unnaturally. Samuel fled, but not before glimpsing a figure, a tall, blue-tinned man, eyes glowing, vanishing into the hayloft. The blue man, that Ozark spectre from 1865, said to be a Confederate deserter cursed by alchemical experiments or native spirits. His appearance heralded doom. Thorpe, witnessing Samuel's terror, documented it feverishly. Hallucination or manifestation, science fails here. Clara, emerging from her trance, smiled sadly. He's a guardian doctor, but the others, they hunger. Haunting events multiplied. Agnes found her reflection in the mirror distorted, mouth moving in silent screams. Elijah's tools rusted overnight, etched with tiny scripts resembling Clara's drawings. Baby Thomas fell ill, feverish, babbling in tongues. Clara healed him with a concoction, but afterward his eyes mirrored hers, bottomless black. The family began to fracture. Mary disappeared for hours, found in the stone circle, humming melodies that chilled the blood. Thorpe pressed Clara for answers. In a candlelit session, she revealed, "My mind is a bridge, doctor," to the old ones sleeping in the hills. They share knowledge, but demand payment. The bloodline. She spoke of visions, ancient entities, displaced by settlers, binding to the Caldwell DNA through Josiah's desecration. Each generation, a prodigy emerged, channeling wisdom. But the price was erasure. Family members pulled into the void, sustaining the spirits. Terror peaked in October. A storm raged, lightning fracturing the sky like cracked glass. Samuel vanished first, last seen heading to the woods to answer the call. Search parties found only his cap, stained with inexplicable blue residue. Mary followed, her bed empty, a trail of footprints leading to the river, dissolving into mist. Agnes, distraught, confronted Clara. "What have you done?" Clara's reply, "Not I, mother. The shadows behind us." Elijah, heartbroken, turned to Thorpe. "Take her away. Science might save her." But as they prepared to leave, the final horror struck. In the dead of night, whispers filled the cabin, names of lost kin echoing like wind through caves. Agnes screamed, her form blurring, pulled into darkness. Elijah fired his gun blindly, but she was gone. Thorpe, cowering, saw Clara unmoved, her eyes glowing faintly. "The bloodline ends with me," she said, "but the knowledge remains." Dawn broke to an empty hollow. Elijah and Thomas missing, Thorpe fleeing in madness. Clara alone, but changed, her presence lingering like a ghost. Reports trickled out, sightings of a girl in the woods, whispering secrets to travelers, families vanishing in her wake. Thus, the Caldwell bloodline faded, a vanishing family swallowed by the Ozarks' insatiable maw. To fully grasp the chilling enigma of Clara Caldwell, we must peel back the layers of history that cloak the Missouri Ozarks, blending the stark realities of rural life with the ethereal threads of folklore that have woven through these hills for centuries. The year 1915 sits at a crossroads in American history, a time when the Great War devoured Europe, yet the United States clung to isolationism, its rural heartlands like the Ozarks remaining bastions of tradition amid encroaching modernity. Here, in this rugged expanse spanning southern Missouri and northern Arkansas, life was a tapestry of hardship, superstition, and unspoken terrors, where the line between fact and legend blurred like mist over the White River. The Ozarks' history traces to prehistoric times, inhabited by Osage and other native tribes who revered the land's caves and springs as portals to the spirit world. European settlement began in earnest after the Louisiana Purchase in 1803, with waves of Scotch, Irish immigrants arriving in the 1820s and 1830s. These hardy folk, fleeing economic woes in the Appalachians, brought a cultural baggage heavy with folklore. Tales of fairies, witches, and omens adapted to the new terrain. By the 1910s, the region was a mosaic of small farms, timber operations, and nascent tourism. Railroads like the Missouri Pacific snake it through, connecting isolated hollows to cities like Springfield, but many areas like Shadow Hollow remained cut off, accessible only by mule trails or footpaths. Rural life in 1915 was unforgiving. Families like the Caldwells subsisted on subsistence farming, corn, sorghum, hogs, supplemented by hunting and gathering. Winters were brutal, with blizzards isolating communities. Summers brought droughts and pests. Health was precarious, no electricity, running water scarce, diseases like tuberculosis rampant, infant mortality hovered high, and remedies relied on folk medicine, herbs, charms, and prayers. Grave houses, small shelters over tombs, dotted cemeteries, a custom rooted in native and European traditions to contain restless spirits. Superstitions permeated daily existence, a cultural armor against the unknown. Planting by moon faces. Plant in the dark of the moon for roots, light for fruits. Weather lore. Red sky at night, sailor's delight, red in morning. Sailor's warning. Omens abounded. A bird in the house foretold death, spilling salt invited evil. Witchcraft loomed large. Tales of witch balls or glass orbs to trap spells and hag riding, nightmares induced by witches. Books like Vance Randolph's Ozark Magic and Folklore, though published later, drawing from oral traditions, catalogue these beliefs. Cures involving silver dimes, love charms with apple seeds, and protections against the oval eye. Legends amplified the eerie. The Blue Man, cited since 1865, embodied post-Civil War trauma. The Ozarks scarred by guerrilla warfare, families divided. Described as a luminous figure, he appeared before calamities, perhaps a metaphor for guilt or unrest. The Ozark Howler, a cryptid with goat horns and bear body. Its wail, an omen of death, echoed Celtic black dogs or native shape-shifters. Vanishing families weren't mere fiction. Historical records note clans disappearing, lost to floods, feuds, or migration, fueling myths of curses or abductions by little people, fairy-like beings. Child prodigies fit this milieu uneasily. In an era of emerging psychology, figures like William James Sidis captivated the nation. Born in 1898, Sidis lectured on four-dimensional bodies at Harvard at age 11. His father, Boris Pushing, accelerated education. But Sidis's life turned tragic, reclusive, bitter against exploitation. Similar cases dotted the early 20th century. Norbert Wiener, math whiz, Winifred Sackville Stoner, poet at 5. Science sought explanations, IQ tests emerging post-1916 Binet-Simon scales, but in rural areas, such gifts evoked suspicion. Eugenics movements, peaking in the 1910s, viewed prodigies as genetic anomalies, while folklore saw them as marked by spirits. Clara's story blends these elements. Her unexplained knowledge mirrors savant syndromes, yet ties to Ozark curses. perhaps inspired by Osage legends of knowledge-bringing spirits. The 1910s saw tension between science and superstition. Thorpe represents progress, clashing with Reverend Hawthorne's faith. Real events like the 1915 Galveston hurricane or Missouri floods amplified fears of nature's wrath, echoed in Clara's predictions. Cultural trauma underpins it all. The Ozarks, a hinterland, per historians resisted modernization, preserving oral histories of displacement. Natives removed via Trail of Tears, settlers battling elements. This bred a worldview where the land held grudges, birthing entities that demanded blood. Clara, as a girl science could never explain, embodies this clash to prodigy in a world fearing the uncanny, her family's vanishing a metaphor for erased bloodlines. Thus, the Ozarks' authenticity lends Clara's tale its chill, a fusion of documented hardships and spectral whispers, reminding us that history's shadows are never truly banished. Delving beyond the surface of Clara Caldwell's harrowing tale, we uncover layers of symbolism and psychological profundity that resonate with universal fears, cultural wounds, and the darker facets of human nature. This story, rooted in the misty veils of the Ozarks, serves as a mirror to our collective psyche, reflecting anxieties about knowledge, innocence corrupted, and the inexorable pull of the unknown. In an ominous tone, let us dissect these elements as if peeling back the skin of reality to reveal the pulsing dread beneath. Symbolically, Clara embodies the archetype of the cursed prodigy, a figure recurrent in folklore and literature, the child whose brilliance is a double-edged sword, slicing through ignorance while inviting doom. Her mind, a conduit for ancient whispers, symbolizes forbidden knowledge, echoing the biblical tree of knowledge or Prometheus's fire. In Ozark context, this ties to settler hubris. Josiah's desecration of sacred sites mirrors colonial arrogance, unleashing forces that demand restitution through bloodlines. The vanishing family represents erasure, a theme in indigenous lore, where spirits reclaim what's stolen. Clara's eyes, bottomless voids, symbolize the abyss Nietzsche warned of. If you gaze long into an abyss, the abyss also gazes into you. Her gaze pierces, unveiling truths that unravel sanity. Psychologically, Clara's story probes the terror of the uncanny. Freud's On Heimlich, the familiar turned strange. A child's innocence twisted into omniscience evokes the fear of losing control, of offspring surpassing or destroying parents. This connects to early 20th century anxieties around child prodigies like Sidis, whose exploitation by ambitious adults led to breakdowns. Boris Sidis's methods, forcing genius, parallel Elijah's initial pride in Clara, morphing into horror. Modern psychology views prodigies through lenses like autism spectrum or savant syndrome, but in 1915, without such frameworks, they were anomalies, perhaps divine, demonic, or evolutionary leaps. Thorpe's failure to explain her highlights science's limits, a theme in Lovecraftian horror where rationality crumbles against cosmic indifference. Thematically, the narrative explores universal fears, the dread of isolation, where the Ozarks' geography amplifies agoraphobia like terrors, hollows as wombs birthing monsters. The Blue Man and Howler personify death omens, tapping into thanatophobia, the fear of mortality. Vanishing evokes existential erasure, the horror of non-existence resonant in cultures with histories of genocide or migration. For Ozark settlers, descendants of displaced peoples, this mirrors transgenerational trauma, epigenetic scars from famine, war, displacement. Cultural trauma weaves deeply. The Ozarks, a forgotten region, embody America's underbelly, rural poverty versus urban progress, superstition clashing with enlightenment. 1915's pre-Dudebui tension amplifies this, war's shadows looming, mirroring personal hauntings. Clara's curse reflects ecological retribution, desecrated land striking back, a prescient eco-horror amid early conservation movements. Gender dynamics lurk too. As a girl genius in a patriarchal era, Clara subverts norms, her power emasculating figures like Thorpe and Elijah, evoking fears of feminine mystique or witchcraft hysteria. Human nature's darkness emerges in responses, villagers' mob mentality. Hawthorne's zealotry, Thorpe's hubris. This critiques exploitation of children, land, knowledge, echoing eugenics' dark undercurrents, where superior traits were commodified. Clara's stoicism amid lost probes detachment, perhaps a coping mechanism or sociopathic trait, questioning if genius alienates from humanity. Ultimately, the tale connects to our era's fears: AI surpassing creators, genetic engineering unleashing unknowns, climate ghosts haunting modernity. Clara haunts because she reminds us knowledge isn't neutral. It's a shadow lengthening with every discovery, whispering that some truths are better left in the dark. As our journey through the shadowed realms of Clara Caldwell's legacy draws to a close, the mists of the Missouri Ozarks seem to thicken around us, carrying the faint echoes of whispers long silenced. We've traversed the chilling narrative of a girl whose mind defied the boundaries of science, unraveling a family bloodline in its wake, and delved into the historical and psychological depths that lend this tale its enduring terror. Yet, like the persistent fog that clings to those ancient hills, the story refuses to dissipate entirely, leaving us with a haunting summary and questions that burrow into the soul. In 1915, amid the isolation of Shadow Hollow, Clara stood as a beacon of inexplicable brilliance. A child who bridged worlds, channeling knowledge from the void. Her family's vanishing, Samuel, Mary, Agnes, Elijah, Thomas, erased a lineage swallowed by forces awakened from desecrated earth. Dr. Thorpe fled, his sanity fractured, publishing fragmented accounts dismissed as delusion. Clara herself, sightings persisted, a spectral girl in the woods, offering cryptic wisdom to lost travelers, only for their kin to fade. By the 1920s, as tourism bloomed in the Ozarks, legends grew. Clara as a guardian spirit or vengeful entity, her name invoked in hushed tones around campfires. But what lingers most is the unsettled: was Clara a victim of a curse, or its architect? Did her genius stem from genetics, as modern science might posit, or from eldritch pacts, as folklore insists? In an age where we map genomes and probe the cosmos, her story mocks our arrogance, whispering that some mysteries resist explanation, lurking in the shadows behind us. Dear listener, as the night deepens, ponder this: what if Clara's essence endures, her mind an eternal conduit, waiting for the next bloodline to claim? Turn off the light, feel the chill. Is that a whisper or just the wind? The shadow behind you knows.